Welcome. So I want to say before I start that this is a session that I co-wrote with my coworker Jonathan. So I want to give a huge shout out to him for that. And also, if you see any illustrations that you think is good or like funny or anything, it's all to him. So just don't think that I'm good at that. In my experience, whenever you talk about compliance, the developers are nowhere to be found. You all would rather run, hide, and do anything than address compliance. And I think that organizations would benefit a lot from looking into a more pragmatic approach to handling compliance. So what do you mean by that? So we're going to look at it from the perspective of internal developer platforms, because that's really my area of expertise. And what I've seen is that compliance is often tucked in at the end, meaning that you don't really design your platform with compliance in mind. It's rather something when you're just about to go to production, someone goes like, oh, what about these compliance processes that we have? So design your platform with compliance in mind. And we rarely have the opportunity of building platforms in a vacuum. You're probably building platforms in an organization that has been operating for a long time. They're all probably already tooling in place for handling compliance. And so work with what is already there and elevate it to the next level. And we know how to build compelling internal developer platforms that ease the everyday life of developers. So let's apply that knowledge and way of thinking on supporting compliance as a baseline. But instead of the idea of a golden path for the majority, we need to aim for full coverage instead. My name is Jessica, and I'm a cloud architect at Trice. I'm also CNCF ambassador and a community organizer in Gothenburg in Sweden. And I worked with internal developer platforms for the last 8 years, both hands-on and as a leader. And the small consultancy company that I work for, that is like the name in the bottom corner that probably none in this room can read, it's called Trice, and we target the intersection between tech and strategy and try to do both technical strategy and hands-on. And when we have done this, we have run into some of the challenges related to compliance-heavy organizations. So particularly those that maybe don't have software as their primary product, or that have existing compliance workflows that are slowing them down in their day-to-day delivery. So let's start off by defining our terms. I know at a conference such as this, most of you have some idea what you think about internal developer platform. But in order for us to have the same idea, let's just start out. So the idea is basically gluing together the sprawler systems that we deal with on a daily basis by building a shared set of tools and components that assist and enable us to deliver faster. And it could be like speeding up provisioning and making CI/CD simpler. It could be encouraging and enforcing best practices around like monitoring, logging, or security, or other things. And it could be providing an abstraction over infrastructure complexity, trying to give like a reduced complex solution to your developers. We have seen examples of resource definitions that give you a deployable application. And ultimately, we do all of these in order to reduce the cognitive load for development teams, allowing them to focus on delivering value instead of doing the various bits that is involved in modern software development. And IDPs can range. It's like what it means and what it means for a certain organization can vary a lot depending on what type of organization you're in. It could be fully automated, very complex, covering all the aspects, or it could be a small set of tools and processes that will ease the workflow. So depending on where you are, it might differ. But the red thread is that we want to make developers work easier and faster and safer through tooling. So why do we as people involved in building internal developer platforms care about compliance? Everyone cares about compliance. It's like second to last session of the day. Everyone loves compliance. So from an organization point of view, there are things such as fines and brand damage can happen if you are actually breaking something and it's due for not being compliant. So from a business point of view, there are dollars that you care about. From a developer point of view, this is usually where things slow down and you get stuck in something that takes a long time to work around. And you just want to push your thing to production because someone cares about getting it out to the user, and now suddenly you have to do all these hops and loops in order to get it through because of compliance. So as a platform team, this is where you actually have a good opportunity to deliver a lot of value for your organization. And organizations that have been around for a while often have existing solutions in place to handle the compliance requirements. And they are often not that nice to work with. So you might have something, so I haven't worked really a lot in those super heavy organizations, but Jonathan has a lot of experience. So he goes like, you know, the application portfolio management tool and the enterprise architecture management tool or configuration management database. And I go like, you said what? But he didn't say that because he said, you know, the APM and the CMB, whatever, and the things, other things. And I think if you work in a compliance-heavy organization, especially like industry, think, I don't know, Gothenburg Automotive, maybe, then you probably heard some of these abbreviations. And if not those, then if you're unlucky, maybe it's a spreadsheet. And that's where you keep your compliance. So all of these things are probably already in place, and you probably have people inside your organization, maybe not on the software part, but are still working with this on a daily basis. So whatever we do, we need to take that into consideration. And as we try to apply more modern ways of thinking, and we are starting to evolve and everything, and we go from, from pets to cattle, and then I heard going to insects, then data quality gets harder and harder because suddenly reality as recorded, what we put in our systems, does no longer match reality as it really is. So it starts drifting apart and data quality suffers. And when data quality suffers, it's hard for you to prove that you are compliant. And despite that we really don't want this to be, and we really want to change it, it's really hard to change these systems. A lot of times trying to replace something fails. And that is often due to the amount of work that is required, and you can't really pull the plug on the old thing. So suddenly you just have 2 new things that you need to keep track of. And so if we take a look at this classic Infinity SDLC sign, like you run around, you iterate, you improve and everything, and you are suddenly disappearing into the black hole of service account provisioning. Or when you are getting to a point where you actually want to deploy something, you get stuck in the maze of registering that change record. Or if you manage to get something to production, you end up in a place where like log access snake pit, and you don't really have any opportunity of getting out of any of these things. So there's a lot of shift left happening, and all of these things end up on the user. Our developers in the organization trying to ship software. And there's a wide variety of tasks involved. And this is where the complaints don't make it easier. But this is not talk of what is wrong in the world. We're going to talk about what we can do about it. So what follows is our take on it. And it's a little bit opinionated. I can't tell you it will work for everyone, but we have some thoughts. So we think that when you build your internal developer platform, it should take on the shape to match towards your compliance. It will not fit magically until you make it do so. And this jagged edge is how compliance looks when everyone is looking at it. And before you try to do something about it, your developers will just have that not uneven edge. But when you integrate towards it, you can improve. And your IDP should be that glue that makes it look a much nicer shape. And you need to start working on building trust over time. And the trust goes not only towards your development teams, because as a platform, we often talk about how to build trust with our users. But in the case of compliance, you need to also build trust with the organization. That means the decision makers, maybe you have a compliance team, you have a risk team, whatever or type of functions are called in your organization. If you're going to support compliance needs, then you need to build trust with those people as well. And don't get distracted by silver bullets, because as I said earlier, what we're looking for here is not like a golden path only. We need to cover all the use cases. So let's take a look at some of the concrete examples, which could be called a pragmatic approach to solving this. And while I know these will probably not be a perfect fit for whatever problems you have, see more as an idea of how you can take something that might not strike you as compliance solving problem at first and see how it can actually be that. So it starts out with looking at the design system, which is a classical internal developer platform style thing. It's often consists of 3 parts. So you have your UX designers who set the theme and the type and the colors and everything. And then you have a component library that implements those, together with a style guide that tells you how to use what and when, and what is the different variations, and how does a button look when it's pressed and not, and when should you have a text on it, and whatnot. And all those things combined together becomes a design system. And it's often used to give a clear and coherent look and feel across a larger product, or multiple teams, or any of these things. This is something that developers often like and tend to want to have. And so there's nothing to fear, nothing to run from, nothing to hide. Everyone is very happy. And the compliance. I don't know if you heard of a European Accessibility Act, but it's a directive that aims to improve the functioning of the internal market for accessible products and services. So more products that are accessible in the market at more competitive prices, and fewer barriers when accessing transport, education, and the open labor market. And they have identified a set of things where they deem this most important to cover, and that just a few of those is computers and operating systems, smartphones, banking services, e-books, and e-commerce. How many in this room feel like you would be under the European Accessibility Act for your product? Yeah, that's quite a few at least. What could this look like when it comes to a design system then? So, for instance, that could be the ability to change the font size in your application. Or it could be the support for screen readers. Or traversing the UI with a keyboard instead of point and click. Including menus and subsections in menus. And I honestly have to say that I did not know how much work it could be involved in making a menu easily traversable by keyboard before I heard someone tell me about it, and there's a lot of work going into it. But also high contrast visuals. So when we combine the power of a design system with the implementation of accessibility, we build it into our design system, we allow our product teams to utilize the already provided accessibility support and easily make their parts of a product meet accessibility requirements. So it's a perfect example of the power internal developer platforms can accelerate and ease the transition to being compliant with regulations. So in my opinion, you hardly even have to be pragmatic to see this is a good idea. So let's move to a different example. Digital Operational Resilience Act, or as we call it, the other DORA. It's something that is aimed towards financial institutes, so banks and I guess RIPS, who was up here talking before, probably know about it as well. And I'm going to look at a very certain part of DORA because it's huge and it covers a lot of things. But we're going to look at ICT management, risk management. And ICT, I always have to look it up, and it stands for Information and Communication Technology, in case anyone was wondering. What they say is that all changes to ICT systems are recorded. It says more things, but that's the part that is important. And what do they mean by that? So they mean that it is the changes that goes to software, hardware, firmware components, systems, or security parameters. I feel like they tried to aim for catch-all. And so basically, looking from a software point of view, there are probably things here that we don't really care about. That, for instance, we don't change and capture in Git. So there are things that your organization probably care about and capture in the change management records that you as a software department don't care about. So it could lead to the following setup. You have a user, they push the code to Git, which triggers a workflow, and at some point it deploys to cloud. But before you deploy to production, you create a change record into Jira, if Jira is your, let's say for an example, chosen change record management. Or it probably looks something like you have the meeting and the calendar, and then go back and forth and up and down, and everything. But let's keep with a more simplified version, because we don't have time for that. So the manual part, how many times would any of you have to do this before you get tired of doing it manually. Like 10, 20, 2, yeah, twice, right? So let's automate it. What is changed, when it was changed, and by whom? All this information is available in Git. So let's remove the manual part here. Let's remove the man in the middle. And so we can get that from our version control system, Git, and we can add a reusable workflow in our CI/CD pipeline that whenever you're deploying to production, it first creates the ticket in Jira, it captures with the changelog from Git, and then it does the deployment, and when it knows if the deployment went well or not, it updates the Jira ticket with success or failure. The pragmatic part here is that we could argue that all the changes are already in Git. So why would you even put it in Jira? Why not just send your Git record to whatever institute that cares about it? But the thing is, like I said before, we have things that are not tracked in Git that we need to care about for the change records. So are you going to keep 2 systems, or are you going to try to force everyone else into your Git? And I think the pragmatic answer here is that you won't, because you won't get everyone on Git, and you don't want to keep 2 systems, because even if it doesn't hurt me personally, it will probably hurt someone else that I'm working with, and we don't want that. So with the built-in support to create Jira tickets automatically, we're leaning into the tooling that's already in place, automating manual tasks, and reducing the cognitive load, and maintaining the auditability for compliance. So we try to make it work. If we're looking at traceability, like it's easy to know kind of what you did last week, but exactly why you did a certain commit, or like 2 weeks ago, maybe it's much harder to remember. In some cases where we handle sensitive data or sensitive systems, we need to be able to answer the question of who viewed what data, when, and why. And most systems already have the type of traceability of who and when, but you can't really capture the why. So we want to add something for that. So let's say that you have a sort of 2 different roles. So you have the view and read role, where you can view like maybe metrics and logs and see what the system looks like, but you can't view sensitive data, or you can't make changes. And then on the other side of the break class, you have the change role that can do all these type of changes and read sensitive data, but you need to request it. And if we apply some glue, we can add traceability of why. So let's say that we build in our platform, we decide the support for break class functionality, for easily gaining the access to elevated access, for limited time or limited scope for certain account. We can pre-populate the ticket field with relevant tickets for that developer. And so we can get the traceability of the why connected to the thing. And that could lead to a series of audit events that, when added together, you get the full scope of why was someone doing something. That's a Jira ticket where you probably have a bug or whatever. And then you can see also the things that happen. And thus you can have a connection of what and who and why, which is awesome. So in the end, we have knocked down a few walls in the maze and tried to make it easier to get your change request through. We are boarding up the snake pit, so you can easily get your access logs without having to suffer too much. Can't find a good metaphor for securing a black hole. Don't go there. I think it's time for you to figure out how to bridge the gap between platform and compliance for your use cases. And it might mean that you have to accept some compromises, but ultimately, the pragmatic approach will help you get further, faster, and away from a snake-filled future. That's all I have. Thank you.
What an awesome and important talk. So we have time for one question before there's a break and the next speaker.
My take on a lot of the procedures is that often you are measured by how well you follow the procedures you have designed yourself. So my take on it, of course, this is important. We should make something that can be automated, but it's also important to create processes that are easy to automate, to maybe change processes a little bit so that you actually can do this. Because very often you're not measured on the content of the process yourself. You are measured by the way you follow the processes you designed yourself.
And I agree, it's really good if you have the opportunity to change the process. And I don't tell any of you that you won't be able to change a process or that it's impossible anywhere. But what I've seen in my experience, some of these type of organizations that often have these type of issues are not very quick in their changing of process. So as a platform team, it might be in your interest to just do the pragmatic workaround and work with rules already there, rather than try to go back to the drawing table. But if you are in an organization that is willing to think in that way, that's obviously the better approach.